I'm George Siegel, and this is the Move the World podcast. Every week, we feature interviews with people dedicated to making the world a better place. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Move the World podcast, where we interview people who in their jobs or in their lives are doing something to make the world a better place for all of us. And my guest today is an author, speaker, actor, improvist, entrepreneur, traveler, father, and more. He loves to explore, yes, physical places around the world, but also to explore the mind. At.Winter, welcome to the Move the World podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
So right off the bat, tell me what you do on a regular basis to try to move the world.
Yeah, my company is called Success Improv, and I teach improv to corporations and groups of people that want to have a more productive work environment, a happier work environment, and a better place to work.
Now, years ago, when I was living in Los Angeles, I did the groundlings, where they have the classes that you take to try to work your way into possibly being in the group. And I've never done anything like that, where you really have to get outside yourself and lose whatever fears and inhibitions you have of looking stupid and just go for it. So improv can really teach you a lot of things, can it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think of it really as that's what we do every moment of every day of our lives. We improvise. We don't wake up with a script. We have no idea how the day is going to go. So we have to go through the world improvising. And most people don't realize that if you're ever watching an improv show, there's kind of some rules that the people are following. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. So those same rules apply to life, and it just makes life easier if you're following them. So
I know we've all seen bad improv on probably at times, and really good stuff. And when it works, you know it's working, and when it's not, you get the idea that they're a little off.
Exactly. And it's easy enough to see that when it's working well, they're all following the same rules. When it's not, it's clear somebody is not following the rules. And somebody who's done enough improv would be able to point out that's what that guy's not doing right now.
Now, when people get up there, do you find that some people are just afraid? They're really self-conscious? I mean, what are the different things you see when you're trying to teach people to try to get them to step out there a little bit?
One of the more common things is how easy it is for people to step out of their comfort zone and just do it. There's a lot of talent out there that people just don't give themselves credit for. There's plenty of people that spend a lot of time in their head thinking about it. And I used to be one of those people where it was like, okay, I have to come up with the right answer before I do it. Otherwise I'm going to look silly. And actually doing improv taught me, don't do that. It doesn't work. And, so yeah, working people through those issues of getting out of their head and just doing it is kind of fun to watch, because by the end of, a class or a session that we're doing, they typically, just start playing and having fun. So it's fun to watch.
Now, your book is What to Expect When Having Expectations, and it's using the anger of unmet expectations to find peace. So what made you write the book, and tell us a little bit about it?
So that ties into the improv classes that I teach. One of the rules that I teach is be specific. And a lot of times you can kind of equate being specific with having expectations, setting those expectations. And while I was doing this class, I would say over and over, the only reason anybody ever gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. And I was like, well, that's a cool saying. It seems to hold true every which way I look at it, but it doesn't solve any problems. And so I sat down with that and put, you're upset on a whiteboard. And I'm like, okay, this is expectations. Let's look at it. And I just started making this flowchart of questions to ask in this process of being upset and having an expectation going unmet. And it's a really cool flowchart. It works really well. It helps me move past things all the time. But what I noticed is that every time that I answer the question, no, for example, have you shared your expectation? No, I haven't shared my expectation. There's a lot of depth behind that word no. Like, why would we not want to share our expectations? What's the fear there? Like, what's stopping us from, setting boundaries, putting out what we need and want from other people? And so that's where I really decided I needed to write a book that goes with this flowchart, that goes with the saying, because I don't like coming up with a problem and not having a solution to go with it. because there's way too many people in the world right now just saying there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. It's like, and what are you going to do about it? I'm just saying there's a problem. Okay, great. Well,
I know.
we need more solution people, not more problem people.
There's a lot of that. Now, some things in the book that I really like. They said the easy path is simply to live each day the same way as you always have. Wake up, go to work, come home, do stuff, go to bed. You'll get a result. You'll have a future, but it won't be your dream. It won't be your goal. Do you find that people get in that rut of just doing the same thing every day and not stepping out of that? And then all of a sudden 5 years has gone by and you've really gone nowhere.
I'd say the majority of the people do that, and then they sit there and blame other people for not getting what they want, and it's kind of frustrating to watch because you see it happening. You're like, you do realize you have a choice. You can choose to do something different today that will change your outcome in the future, but you have to consciously make that choice of saying, I'm not going to do the same thing every day. Think of anybody with a dieting goal or a weight loss goal or something like that. Well, if they wake up, they have the same breakfast they've always been having, they go to work, they have the same lunch they've always been having, they go out to eat, so they're spending money, they're buying food that's not healthy. They come home, they have dinner, they sit on the couch, they snack, they go to bed. Same thing every day. They didn't add exercise, they didn't change the food that they're putting in their bodies. So nothing's going to be different if they keep going down that same path. But if they choose on one day to say, hey, I am going to eat differently today, then you just have to keep doing that over and over and over and over, but until you get the result that you want. And a lot of people aren't willing to practice, and that's what it takes. It takes practice on a day-to-day basis until that practice becomes a new habit. And that's what people always want the magic bullet. I just want a pill that I can take every day and lose all the weight I want. Well, maybe someday that'll happen, and until then you got to do the work. And same thing with personal growth and going after your goals. You got to do the work.
And what struck with me about that paragraph, I made a documentary film called The Last House Standing, and it's about how people make choices of where they want to live without understanding the risks, and they just blindly go into it with their biggest investment, which is their house. Then when something bad happens and their house gets destroyed, they're mad and they want to blame somebody for what happened to them. And that's kind of what this is like. If you're just in the same pattern of just doing the same thing and not thinking beyond that, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And that's a lot of what we see in the world today is everybody's blaming everybody else, but they're not taking the time to say, what choices did I make to put myself in this situation? There's so many people that are just, they don't want to look at themselves because fundamentally nobody wants to be wrong. And to look at yourself and say, I chose something that's not working for me, so I was wrong in that choice, is kind of a painful thing for people to admit to. But until you admit to, I hold the responsibility for where I am today, now I can choose to do something different, you'll never do something different, because you have to first realize that you're in control and it's your own choices that put you where you are.
I think a lot of people like to just complain, and it takes a certain ability, and it's not that hard to just look at a situation and go, hey, how could I have done something different? How could I have changed this? And I hear that a lot with people with their jobs complaining, or kids in school. My kids will say, that's a terrible teacher. And I would say, well, is everybody else doing poorly in the class? No, they found out ways to work with that teacher to get what they need to get. And that's really an important thing for people to understand, isn't it?
Absolutely. I look at the world today, and whether you believe in masks or not, that's beside the point. But if a business says you have to wear a mask to enter our business, if you sit there and argue about a mask for 5 or 10 minutes, you could have been in that store, gotten what you want, paid for it, been in your car and on your way home before you ever even stepped foot in the store, by simply complaining about a rule that this particular business put in place. So you're choosing at that point to fight and complain rather than just do what's necessary to get what you want and move on. And I get why people argue and fight. Nobody wants to be wrong. And if you're like, I don't believe in masks, they don't work, I don't want to wear one, then you don't want to be wrong about walking into a place and putting on a mask. And vice versa, you don't want to be wrong about wearing a mask, so you're going to fight other people to say, well, you need to wear a mask because I'm wearing a mask and that's what's important, right? it goes both ways. Everybody argues about the strangest things, but nobody takes that responsibility to say, look, if I just do this, it's done. Like, I don't even have to think twice about it. One of the great examples I always like to use is, if I have plans on a given night and a friend says, hey, do you want to go to the game? I'm always down for going to live in-person games. Like, that's one of my favorite things. But if I already have plans, you know how easy it is for me to just say, nope, I'm busy. Done. I don't have to think about it anymore. Whereas if I say, you know what, hold on to that. Let me call these 3 people and reschedule that, move this around. Now I'm spending all this time and effort to change my plans to go do something else. But if you're constantly choosing the things that you want to be doing, it's really easy to say no to something else that comes along because, I already made plans. I'm happy about my plans, so I'm good. So if you're not happy about the plans you make, don't make those plans, right?
There's an old Seinfeld joke where he goes, men don't care what's on TV. We care what else is on TV. And it's like, we always want to be thinking of doing something else. And a lot of times it helps to just, and you're right, because all the work it takes to get out of what you had scheduled, just say no.
Yeah.
Now, something else in the book, in our past experiences, if our past experiences lead us to believe that we aren't likable, and that becomes our subconscious thought, then we have an expectation to move forward that people don't want to be around us so that we can be right about our perspective. We exclude ourselves from situations to confirm the belief. We don't see the signs where people are including us. So that's kind of like you think something, so you act it, you make it worse, and then it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah, the whole Napoleon Hill, to think is to create. I mean, it all goes back to that, where, and a lot of times it's subconscious, so we don't even know that we're doing this. But those people that really like to have drama in their lives, they'll say, I don't like drama in my life, and yet you always see them with drama in their life. They're always complaining about something. There's always something happening to them. It's because their subconscious is set on drama. For some reason, that got them what they needed when they were younger, and now it's perpetuated ongoing in their life. Same thing with, if you have friends that stab you in the back for whatever reason when you're young, you just think anybody that becomes close enough to be a friend is going to stab me in the back, so why have friends? Right? This isn't a conscious thought. We're sitting here as adults saying, like, yeah, I want friends. I want to go hang out in somebody's backyard and drink beer and do barbecues, and you want these things, right? But then why don't you? It's, something happened in your past that's preventing you from taking those steps to say, you know what, maybe this guy's not going to stab me in the back like everybody else. And
so how do you get past that? Do you just step out there and do it? Do you have to feel better about yourself? Do you have to trust people? Because I've found a lot of times when I've trusted people, I'll be honest, a lot of people let me down. If you get too, if you count on them for too much, they end up doing something that you go, what did I even think was going on there? I mean, how do you get past that?
Well, a lot of that, again, goes back to the whole expectations thing. Sometimes we don't even know we have these expectations of others, right? So it's easy for somebody to let us down if we have expectations of them and we don't even share those expectations. And it's really hard to share those expectations if we don't even know we have them until they're going unmet. And so it's a tricky game, because you have to really start to become aware of your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions and everything that's going on, so that you can stop issues before they start. You can explore your past so that doesn't affect your future. And it's a practice at the end of the day, because let's say you want a new friendship. You've been hanging out with this, friend, this guy at work. You think he's cool. He invites you over, to a barbecue on a weekend, right? The subconscious is saying, don't do it. It'll ruin whatever you have here at work, right? And the conscious mind is like, finally, a friend, like, this is great, right? So what do you do there? The subconscious is going to say, it's you don't do this because it's going to hurt you. And the subconscious doesn't know any better. It's just, this is what is, don't do it. And your conscious mind is like, I'm tired of not having friends and I like backyard barbecues, I'm going. Well, your conscious mind is very, very strong, but you have to stick with that conscious mind and say, it's going to be different. I'm going to be different. I'm going to this party, and we'll take it step by step, day by day. And sometimes the expectations we have of others are unreasonable, or we haven't talked with them enough to be on the same page. One of my issues is I like to be early to things. I'm typically 5 to 10 minutes early to wherever I'm going, to whoever I'm meeting with. If not, something's going on, and I'll usually text them and say I should be there right on time, but I might be like 1 or 2 minutes late. Right, 1 or 2 minutes late in today's world is like nothing for most people. Mm-hmm. So when I tell somebody, I'm typically 5 to 10 minutes early, I'm more or less setting an expectation with them, saying I'm going to be early. If you're there or not early, that's great. I'm not saying one way or another. I'm just simply letting you know I'm an early person. Now, they may say I'm always late, and I'll be like, great, now I know to expect you to be late. But now we've had that conversation. I know what to expect of them. Therefore, they're not going to really let me down. However, if I didn't tell them I'm an early person and they didn't tell me that they're always late, I'm now early. So I've been sitting there for 10 minutes. They're 10 minutes late. I've been sitting there for 20 minutes. Half of that is on me because I chose to be early. No big deal. Whatever. I know that. The other 10 minutes on their end, that's a little bit of like, hey, common courtesy, like let's talk. But again, I have to look at myself and say, is it reasonable for them to share that they're always late? Maybe nobody's called them on it. So I have to really explore that, is like, what am I okay with here? And again, I didn't do my part in setting those expectations with them, setting those boundaries. You can think of expectations as boundaries to say, hey, if you're more than 10 minutes late, I'm out. I'm gone. I have other things to do. I'm not going to sit around and wait for you. But that's going to set that expectation. And they could say, no, I'm usually 15 minutes late. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Okay, now we're having a conversation. Now I know. And I'm like, okay, well, I'd rather not do a meeting with you then, because I don't want to sit around for an extra 15 minutes.
No.
Like,
give them 10 minutes and leave. I mean, I have no patience for that. I found as I get older, I'm drawn more to people that have no drama and are just easy to be around. If it's too much work, I'd rather sit home and watch TV or, anything but deal with somebody else's drama, especially late in it. My dad used to say, we're leaving at 7, and the car rolled out of the driveway at 7. If you weren't there, you didn't get in. My kids will take it to 7, 7:05, 7:10. We're yelling, come on. So now I've said, look, I'm leaving at 7. And you really have to see it drive away once to get the feeling of what that's like.
Oh, I have a great story with that one. So my son, when he was 2, pretty sure it was 2 or 3, we're leaving the store to go home. And I get into the car and I'm like, okay, it's time to get in the car, right? And he wouldn't do it. So I got in, I started the car, I started backing up. He lost it. Like, he was crying up a storm. Has he ever not gotten in the car when I told him to since? Every single time I'm like, get in the car. He's like, in the car. He does not think twice about it anymore, because I did exactly what you're talking about. I'm like, look, we're going home. We're getting in the car. This is happening.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think parents have gotten a lot easier on kids. I don't think we're as tough on them as we used to be. And I think, with getting back to the friends thing for just a second, I think social media has really messed that up with likability and everything, because you can think you're friends with somebody and then you're in a chat and somebody said something about somebody else. I mean, I see this drama with my kids all the time. As opposed to when I was growing up, you're younger than me, but when you actually had to do face-to-face interaction, it's kind of harder to tweet about somebody when you had to talk to them face-to-face.
Absolutely. You kind of see the true color of people, not color, the true nature of people, with social media. Yeah. When they sit there and they say what's on their mind without thinking twice about it and what the consequences are. And consequences are, I think, one of those things that people lack in parenthood these days. I like to think of, so those parents that you see it at the store and they're counting to 5 before the child will listen. At some point they started saying, do this or there's a consequence. And now I'm going to count to 5 until there's a consequence. So what does the kid learn? The consequence doesn't happen until they reach the number 5. Yeah. So I have until 5 to keep doing what I'm doing. Whereas if you just said, if this, then that, if you set that consequence and then you follow through on that consequence, they're going to learn that when you say what you say, you mean it, and they're not going to have to count to 5. And it's because it's a learned behavior, whether it's at 0 or at 5. That's what you're teaching the child. And so that's what the consequence, and you're setting an expectation for the child. And so now they understand the expectation and how it works. So they understand the boundary, they understand the consequence. It's kind of like, back to my son with the car. I say, get in the car, we're going to this place or that place. He doesn't think twice about it. I don't have to count to 5. He knows the consequence. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of world that we live in. At the same time, we also have to give kids a break, because how often do we say, okay, time to turn off the game, we're leaving? Yet if some adult said, hey, time to get off your computer, we're leaving, we're like, give me 5 minutes to finish up what I'm doing. Right. It's not uncommon for an adult to say, hold on a second, I'm not ready. Kids don't know how to verbalize that, but you give them a 5-minute warning. It's so much easier for them to get off, because you're saying, we're leaving at 5. Now it's been 5, done. They had time to finish up what they were doing. And I think that's a very healthy thing to do. But again, it's setting expectations, sharing those expectations, and being reasonable about it. Just to expect a kid to change on a whim, it's not in their nature. They're so in the moment, they have to prepare themselves to move on to something else.
Yeah, it's hard to get them to shift gears. I made a film. My first film was called License to Parent, and it was about the parenting problem in this country. And, we're not actually advocating licensing parents, but there are a lot of people that are parents that if they had to interview for that job, probably would not have gotten it. Because I think it's the toughest job in the world. And if you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, man, I applaud you. I don't know how you do it. That's tough work.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And so, with all this stuff, I think kids have to learn. I think we have to be tougher with them. I don't believe in hitting or any of that stuff, but the consequences, seeing you drive away, going and taking the game away. I mean, they have to, you're right. If you count to 5, they're waiting till 5 every time.
Yeah. And again, it's just a learned behavior. You got to teach them what you want. So.
Yeah. Now you also talk about being upset is a trigger for something great to happen. It's a point where we can choose to do something different, a point that can make things better for us and those around us. It's a point in time where we can choose peace. So are you saying it's not bad to be upset, or learn how to work with being upset?
Both. I personally think that getting upset allows you to grow, because something just came to light that you may not have been aware of before. The choice there, though, is to not stay upset. It's to learn from it. And a lot of people in the world today don't choose that path. They choose to stay upset, whether that's for a day, a week, a month. You'll hear about those stories of people in families where they haven't talked in 10 years because somebody got upset with somebody else. And rather than actually talk about it and figure out that it was a misunderstanding, you've now lost 10 years with that person. And choosing in the moment of being upset to say, hey, something's happening right now that I have a choice to learn from and do something different with, is so empowering. It allows you to grow from your past. Because you have a friend that, you're starting this new friendship, you show up at the barbecue, and, something bad happens. It's not really that bad, but according to your past, it's bad. You're kind of upset now because you had this expectation, but now you can stop yourself and say, is that expectation still valid from when I was 7? Right? Because the last time that happened was when I was 7, and I've kept my guard up for 30 years. So now maybe I can let that guard down, and maybe I don't have to be upset at the situation, because that's what a 7-year-old would do, and an adult wouldn't do that. Right? Whatever that situation might be, it can be really stupid, but that's how we operate as humans. The stuff that happens when we're young is just set in stone in our brains, and we operate as a 7-year-old sometimes, and we don't even realize it.
Now, can some of the principles in the book make you realize, okay, I just shouldn't be friends with that person, or I just don't want anything to do with that family member? I mean, not everything is fixable, if people can't, it requires both people to communicate. If one person's really dug in and has no desire to communicate, what do you do about that?
You're dead on. Is it does come down to communication. So you have an expectation, and just because you share your expectation with somebody else doesn't mean they're automatically agreeing with it, because they have their own expectations. And it's never like one-to-one expectation, whatever. There's layers on layers, and expectations are so massive and many that exploring them takes a lot of time and effort, but it's totally worth it if you're willing to look at it. So if you have this expectation of a family member and they have a different expectation, if you're able to communicate and talk about it, you might be able to come to some negotiation, some agreement where you can both work together and still be in the same room. Sometimes you're actually coming to an agreement with yourself to say, I'm going to spend the least amount of time possible with this family member when those opportunities come up. And I've met people like that. They're like, I will spend 5 minutes at my parents' house, say hello, be cordial, and then I'm out because I can't do it. And they've made it work for them. And, there's probably still a lot of underlying expectations that nobody's really willing to talk about. But you can set those boundaries with other people. And if you've shared your boundaries, you've shared your expectations, and the other person knows them, but continually crosses that boundary, continually tests those expectations, you're within your rights to just step back and say, you're upsetting me by continually going past my boundaries. So rather than change my boundaries, I'm going to change the amount of time and energy I'm spending with you.
Yeah, certainly seems like a solution. Now, do you think it's gotten more challenging because the world is so divided when, everything's like 50-50 in this country? So half the people hate something, half the people like something. So automatically when you're making friends or out there, you're fighting half the people if you let things bother you. How do you cope with the way the environment is turned in this world?
I have to go back to the whole nobody wants to be wrong argument. And the only way that I've found past that is through one-on-one real conversation, not over text, like one face-to-face, voice-to-voice, where you can really kind of work through it and get an understanding of one another. And, I had somebody, past client of mine, he sent me a TikTok video. He's on one side of the aisle, I'm on the other side of the aisle, and we know it. And he sent this video. He's like, I want to get your take on it. And I watched this video. I'm like, that's fine. He's asking for a legitimate understanding here. And my response was, this is highly out of context. I don't know what was said before or after this clip. So I don't know what the meaning of the speech was. I don't know what was meant. So I'm not able to comment on it because it's out of context. And that is the world we live in today, is there's so much information that's out of context. You can take a sound clip, get the worst words out of it, cut it off, and then add whatever commentary you want. And now that's the truth. Yeah. Where that's not the truth. The truth is listen to the entire thing and then decide. Don't take somebody else's commentary on this little snippet and call it truth. And the thing is that if you're on one side of the aisle or the other, you don't want to be wrong about where you stand in your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, whatever it might be. And so we have this magical thing called the internet where you can 100% be right about what you believe 100% of the time, because we have confirmational bias at our fingertips. And it's not good. In my opinion, it is not good, because confirmational bias, no matter where you stand, is detrimental to a conversation and an understanding of one another. I see the same arguments on both sides of the aisle. Everybody's saying the exact same thing, same argument, word for word about the other side. And yet nobody's talking, saying, wait, we're saying the same thing. We're actually in agreement. And the problem is out there and not with us talking. Right. And it becomes painful to watch at times, because because I have this understanding that nobody wants to be wrong. If you find out you're wrong on your own, you'll beat yourself up for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe a couple days, but you'll get over it. You'll move on. If somebody tells you you're wrong, you will fight them pretty much until you're dead, unless you're willing to open up your eyes, have a conversation, explore information that might go against your confirmational bias, and really, really kind of explore the world and come up with possibly a new conclusion. Who knows?
There was a great example of this kind of stuff going on over the past week with the Joe Rogan podcast with, I think it's Sanjay Gupta or whatever from CNN. Are you familiar with that?
I know of both of them, yeah.
Yeah. So what it was, Rogan had him on and was blasting him for CNN's coverage of a lot of different things involving the virus and everything. And that's all that was being replayed on social media. Well, yesterday I read an article that said Rogan said, we talked for 3 hours. We talked about a lot of other things. I like the guy. If you were just to watch the clips that were getting promoted and that's all you saw, you would go, God, they hate each other. What a dumb thing this guy went on the Rogan show. But then you see, wow, they had a long conversation. They were able to communicate. And I think that's what happens with the internet now. People are going to blast out those few moments, those gotcha moments. And that's just a small part of what went on. It can really be misleading to a situation.
Yeah, it feeds the confirmational bias. Absolutely.
So if you had to say what the ultimate takeaway from your book is that you want people to come away with, because it's not a difficult, I still like to say not a difficult read. Doesn't take a long time, but I found it really interesting. What would you tell people is the reason they want to pick it up and read it?
I always tell people that the learning where your expectations come from and why you have them is so huge in knowing what to do when you find those moments in time that you're upset. And once you understand why you have your expectations and where they come from, being upset is no longer a scary thing. It's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity for growth. And as long as, if nothing else, if you recognize I'm upset, I have a choice, your world will be drastically different. And you might actually start getting your dreams as opposed to staying victim to your life.
Now, you've dabbled in a number of different things. So you're doing things that you want to do. If somebody's sitting out there with an idea and they think, oh, I can't make a difference, I'm not going to be able to move the world at all, what would you tell somebody to do if they think they have something but they're just afraid to do anything with it?
You just have to start and keep it close to the chest. Don't share it with a lot of people until it's actually got some feet under it, because a lot of people will douse your dreams because they don't believe in you, and that's their own stuff. That it's not like they're trying to do that. Like, parents are great sometimes, but sometimes they have their own bias on what you're capable of doing because they saw you grow up, but they don't know you as an adult as nearly as well as you know yourself. So sometimes you have to follow your dreams quietly for a while until they actually have some feet under them, and find a support group. So I had an idea that I wanted to write a sci-fi novel, and I reached out on social media. I said, who else is looking to write a sci-fi book? I'm putting together a writer's group to do this. And there's 4 of us in the group. And I just finished my first draft of my first sci-fi novel about a week and a half ago. And I never liked reading, and now here I am. I'm writing self-help books, I'm writing sci-fi novels. Like, it's just insane. But you know what? It was something I wanted to do, and I had it kind of stewing in my brain for like 6 months, and then all of a sudden somebody gave me the permission by saying writing fiction is like doing improv. And because I live in the world of improv, it was like, boom, lights on, let's do this. It's happening. And it was easy for me. And one of the guys in the group, he's way more educated on writers and how they write. And he said there's kind of like 2 different kinds. There's the planners and the pantsers or something. I think it's pantsers. But there's the planners who like map out everything they want to write, the chapter for chapter. They have the plot, everything figured out before they even start writing. And then there's the pantsers who would just go. They see where it goes and it just takes off. And he came to the realization that my writing style is a pantser. And I start typing, and all of a sudden, like, I go off on this direction. I'm like, okay, I'm the one writing this book, and I had no idea we were going over there, but that's where we're going. So let's go with it. And it was everything that I thought was going to happen didn't necessarily happen the way I thought it would. in this own book that I wrote. So it was a lot of fun. And so going back to your question, just do it. You might have the most fun you've ever had in your life. And even if you do it just for yourself, it's better than not having done it at all.
Yeah. And having a support group can be huge. I got in a support group with 8 other documentary filmmakers. And I originally thought, well, what do I care about what these guys are doing? First of all, they all had really good films. So when I watched their films, it made me go, there's a lot of talented people out there. But they openly shared ideas and we pushed each other to do things you might not normally do. So a support group can be huge.
Yeah. And as long as you don't look at it as competition, it can be so powerful because, you're not doing the same documentary as the other guy. And so you're able to work together to say, hey, have you thought about this view or that fade or this whatever, right?
Yeah.
To enhance your video. So you are able to bounce those ideas off each other. And honestly, like the guy in the group that I was talking about, he's given a lot of inspiration to other people in the group. I've given him some inspiration to possibly get off of the analysis paralysis train and thinking too much about his book and just doing some stuff. And so the 4 of us, we help each other out, and we're all at completely different levels of where we are in this book, in our process. Like he's been writing his book for years. I took like 6 months to write mine, and other people, they're still just dabbling, starting little bits here and there, and they haven't created even chapter 1 yet, but they're still kind of working on the process.
When's your book coming out? When's that one coming out?
I'm hoping to have it ready to go by the end of the year.
Awesome. Well, I hope you'll share that information. So I definitely want to check it out. So your book, the book we were talking about, What to Expect When Having Expectations, where can people buy it?
So the best way to find it is to go to my website, havingexpectations.com, and there's links to Amazon. Yeah, I don't think I have links to anywhere else, but it's out there. You search the title, you'll find it wherever you want.
Yeah, that's a good link to have. The one to Amazon. Amazon runs the world, don't they?
I mean, for books, absolutely.
They do. Yeah, well, hey, man, thank you so much for your time and continued success. And I look forward to hearing about the next book when it comes out.
Sounds good. Thanks again for having me.
All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Move the World podcast. I encourage you, if you enjoyed the podcast and you're on Amazon or Spotify or any of the platforms, please leave a review and share it with your friends. It's challenging finding an audience to do anything, but if you like it and you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you helping out a little bit. And also follow Ben's advice. If there's an idea that you have, something that you want to do, just give it a try. Who knows? You may end up moving the world. We'll see you next time.